Did you know that the skeletons rising from the floor during House on Haunted Hill were actually controlled by real people hiding beneath the stage? That single creepy moment made audiences scream so loudly that some theaters had to stop the film and calm people down. This movie was more than just a horror film. It was a wild, wonderful, and slightly crazy experiment in fear. Dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about House on Haunted Hill. Number 20. A Millionaire's Party. Gone wrong. Imagine being invited to a party inside one of the most terrifying houses in the world. That is exactly where this story begins. In House on Haunted Hill, a very rich and very strange man named Frederick Loren invites 5 guests to spend the entire night inside a haunted mansion. If they survive until morning, each one will receive $10,000. It sounds simple. It sounds almost fun. But nothing about this night is simple. And nothing about it is fun. The movie opens with this wild idea, and it grabs you immediately. You feel excited and nervous at the same time, which is exactly what the filmmakers wanted. The concept was invented by writer Rob White, who worked very closely with director William Castle. Together, they wanted to create a film that felt less like watching a horror movie and more like being trapped inside one. They wanted the audience to feel like a guest at the party, too. Every detail, every shadow, every sound was designed to make you feel like you were standing in that house alongside the characters. What seemed like a fun party invitation on the surface was really a carefully built trap for the audience's imagination, and it worked beautifully. Millions of people walked into theaters and walked out shaking. The story felt personal because the setup was personal. An invitation, a choice, a consequence. That simple structure made all the difference. It looked like a silly ghost story. It turned out to be something much smarter. Number 19. The Man Behind the Magic, William Castle. William Castle was not just a director. He was a showman, a magician, and a genius at making people feel things they had never felt before inside a movie theater. Born in New York City in 1914, Castle grew up loving theater and storytelling. By the time he made House on Haunted Hill, he had already directed dozens of films, but none of them had the special energy he was looking for. This movie changed everything. Castle believed that watching a movie should be an event, not just an experience. He wanted people to feel the film in their bodies, not just in their minds. He studied the work of showmen like P.T. Barnum and applied those ideas to Hollywood filmmaking. He created promotional stunts, audience tricks, and in-theater surprises that nobody had ever done before. For House on Haunted Hill, he invented something called Emergo, which we will talk about very soon. But beyond the tricks, Castle genuinely cared about storytelling. He wanted his horror films to have heart, humor, and a little bit of madness. He often appeared in his own film trailers and commercials, talking directly to audiences like a friendly but slightly unsettling neighbor. People trusted him and feared him at the same time. That combination was his greatest talent. Castle made audiences feel like they were in on a secret, and that feeling kept them coming back for more. What looked like simple entertainment was actually deeply crafted psychology, not just a director. A dream architect? Number 18. Vincent Price and the role he was born to play. When you think about Vincent Price, you think about elegance mixed with danger. That is exactly what the character of Frederick Loren needed, and casting Price in the role was one of the best decisions William Castle ever made. Price was already a well-known actor by 1959, but House on Haunted Hill gave him something new. It gave him the chance to be truly theatrical in a way that felt completely natural. Price had a voice like velvet wrapped around a blade. Every word he spoke felt both charming and threatening. He could smile at you and still make you feel like something bad was about to happen. That rare quality made Frederick Loren unforgettable. Price reportedly loved the script and loved the character from the very first read. He threw himself into the role with full commitment. Scene early in the film where Loren explains the rules of the party while standing in a beautifully lit room. And Price delivers those lines with such calm confidence that you cannot tell if he is a hero or a villain. That ambiguity was intentional. Castle and White wanted the audience to guess, to wonder, to be unsure. Price made that uncertainty feel completely real. Off-camera, colleagues described Price as warm, funny, and deeply intellectual. He loved art, cooking, and literature, but on camera, he became something else entirely. He became the kind of man who could host a dinner party at a haunted house and make it feel completely normal. What looked like acting was actually pure mastery. Number 17. Emergo, the skeleton that flew over the audience. Here is where things get wonderfully strange. William Castle was not satisfied with just making a scary movie. He wanted the horror to leap off the screen and into the theater itself. So he invented Emergo. During the film's most frightening moment, when a skeleton rises dramatically inside the haunted house on screen, a real glowing skeleton prop was released from a hidden wire above the theater audience. It swooped through the darkness right over the heads of screaming moviegoers. Castle arranged for this skeleton, which was made of plastic and painted to glow in the dark, to travel on a thin wire from one side of the theater to the other. Ushers were positioned in darkness and triggered the mechanism at exactly the right moment in the film. The effect was supposed to terrify, and sometimes it did. But audiences in many theaters quickly figured out the trick, and some brave young moviegoers started throwing popcorn boxes and candy at the skeleton as it flew past. Certain theaters, it reportedly got hit so many times that it fell apart mid-flight. Castle took the feedback with a laugh. He understood that even the reaction of throwing popcorn meant people were engaged. They were alive inside the experience. Some theater owners loved the gimmick. Others thought it was ridiculous. But nobody forgot it. The newspapers wrote about it. Kids talked about it at school, and ticket sales went through the roof. It was designed to terrify, turned into pure, unforgettable fun. Number 16. The Real House, a famous Los Angeles landmark. The haunted mansion in the film looks ancient, twisted, and deeply unsettling. But the real building used for the exterior shots was not some abandoned ruin in the middle of nowhere. It was actually a famous and beautiful architectural landmark in Los Angeles, California. The house used for exterior filming was the Ennis House. Built in 1924, the Ennis House sits in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles and is considered one of Wright's most dramatic and unusual creations. The building is made of patterned concrete blocks that give it a dark Mayan temple-like appearance. From certain angles, especially in black and white photography, it looks genuinely otherworldly. The texture of the walls, the heavy stone quality, and the geometric designs made it the perfect visual stand-in for a place where ghosts might actually live. Wright designed the Ennis House as a private residence, and over the decades it has appeared in numerous films and television shows. But its role in House on Haunted Hill remains one of its most iconic appearances. The building has faced challenges over the years, including damage from earthquakes and rain, but preservation efforts have kept it standing. Every time someone watches the movie and feels that chill when the mansion first appears on screen, what looked like a house of horror was actually a house of art. Number 15. The script was written in less than 2 weeks. Great stories often take years to develop. Screenwriters rewrite scenes hundreds of times. Directors change dialogue on the day of filming. But the script for House on Haunted Hill was written by Rob White in an incredibly short amount of time. White reportedly completed the screenplay in less than 2 weeks. William Castle gave him a very simple brief. Write a story about people locked in a haunted house overnight. Make the characters interesting enough to suspect each other, and leave the audience guessing until the very end. White sat down and wrote. He was a practiced storyteller who had written both novels and screenplays, and he understood how to build tension through character rather than special effects. The result was a tightly constructed story with clever twists, believable motivations, and just enough ambiguity to keep audiences arguing long after the credits rolled. White's ability to write quickly without losing quality was remarkable. He understood that horror stories need simple premises made complicated by human behavior. Supernatural elements in the script were always secondary to the human drama happening between the characters. Was the house truly haunted? Were the characters lying to each other? Was Lauren the real monster? White built those questions carefully and left many of them open. The fast writing process also meant the story felt spontaneous and fresh. There was no overthinking, no endless revision that can sometimes drain the life from a script. What was born quickly came out alive. Speed, in this case, was not a weakness. It was the whole secret. Number 14. The film was shot in just 12 days. If writing the script in 2 weeks feels fast, consider this. The entire film was shot in approximately 12 days. That is an astonishingly short production schedule, even by the low-budget standards of late 1950s Hollywood. William Castle was known for working quickly and efficiently. He planned every shot carefully before stepping onto set, so there was almost no wasted time during filming. Cast and crew worked long hours to meet the tight schedule. Sets were built on a studio soundstage in Hollywood, which allowed for complete control over lighting and atmosphere without worrying about weather or outside noise. The interior sets, including the grand ballroom, the basement acid pool room, and the dark winding hallways, were all constructed specifically for this film. Cinematographer Carl Guthrie used stark black and white photography to maximize the creepy atmosphere without requiring expensive equipment or complex lighting rigs. Every shadow was intentional, every beam of light was placed with purpose. Tight schedule actually helped the film in some unexpected ways. Actors did not have time to overthink their performances. They reacted naturally to the strange environment around them, and that natural energy reads beautifully on screen. There is a rawness to some of the performances that feels genuine rather than rehearsed. Castle thrived under pressure, and he passed that energy to everyone around him. What could have felt rushed ended up feeling urgent. And urgency in a horror film is exactly what you need, not just fast. Alive. Number 13. Carol Ohmart and the Complicated. Mrs. Lauren. Every great story needs a complicated woman, and House on Haunted Hill has a spectacular one in the character of Annabelle Lauren. Played by actress Carol Ohmart, Annabelle is Frederick Lauren's wife, and their relationship crackles with tension from the very first moment they appear together on screen. Ohmart was a beautiful and talented actress who had appeared in both films and television before being cast in this role. She brought a cold, calculating quality to Annabelle that made the character genuinely dangerous. The audience is never quite sure whose side she is on, whether she is a victim, a schemer, or both. Ohmart reportedly had a good working relationship with Vincent Price, though their characters despised each other on screen. That professional respect allowed them to play their scenes with just enough restraint to make the tension feel electric rather than melodramatic. Castle appreciated Ohmart's ability to shift between vulnerability and menace within the same scene. It was a difficult balance to achieve, and she pulled it off with impressive control. Ohmart's career never quite reached the heights that her talent deserved, and House on Haunted Hill remains her most famous role. Film historians who have revisited the movie in recent years often point to her performance as one of the most underrated in the genre. She gave Annabelle layers that the script only partially suggested, filling in the rest with her body language, her eyes, and the quiet way she moved through the haunted spaces around her. Like a simple villain was actually something far more human and far more frightening. Number 11. The movie cost less than $200,000. In today's world of $100 million blockbusters, it is almost impossible to imagine making a full-length feature film for less than $200,000. But that is exactly what William Castle did with House on Haunted Hill. The entire production budget was extremely modest, even by the standards of 1959. Castle was experienced at working with small budgets, and he knew where to spend money and where to save it. The studio soundstage sets were built efficiently. The cast, while talented, were not the highest-paid stars in Hollywood. The special effects were practical, creative, and inexpensive. Every dollar was spent thoughtfully. And the result was a film that grossed millions of dollars at the box office, making it one of the most profitable low-budget films of Castle. Reportedly earned back the production cost many times over, and the film continued to make money through reissues, television broadcasts, and later home video releases. The commercial success of House on Haunted Hill proved something important to Hollywood. Audiences did not need enormous budgets to feel genuinely scared. They needed good stories, strong performances, and a filmmaker who understood how fear actually worked. Castle demonstrated that creativity and showmanship could accomplish more than any expensive special effect ever could. Producers who dismissed low-budget horror as unimportant quickly started paying attention. House on Haunted Hill changed the way the industry thought about fear and money at the same time. What cost very little changed how a whole industry thought. Small budget, enormous impact. Number 10. The film was originally released as a double feature. When House on Haunted Hill first appeared in theaters in February of 1959, many audiences saw it as part of a double feature, meaning two films were shown back-to-back for the price of one ticket. This was an extremely common practice in American cinemas during the 1950s, and Castle knew how to use it to his advantage. Being part of a double feature meant his film needed to make a strong impression quickly, because audiences might already be tired or comfortable from watching the first film. Castle designed the opening of House on Haunted Hill to grab attention immediately. The film begins with floating heads in darkness, speaking directly to the audience before a single piece of scenery even appears. It was a bold, almost theatrical opening that woke people up and pulled them forward in their seats. Double feature format also meant that Castle's film was often paired with other horror or science fiction movies, which helped build its identity as part of a larger movement in American genre cinema during that period. The late 1950s were a golden age for imaginative, low-budget horror films that spoke to audience anxieties about the world around them. House on Haunted Hill fit perfectly into that landscape. Being on a double bill did not diminish it. If anything, it gave the film extra energy from the shared excitement of the audience. Could have been a second-place experience, became a first-place memory, not just paired. Perfect. Number 8. Elisha Cook Jr. brought real vulnerability to the film. Among the 5 guests invited to spend the night in the haunted house, the character of Watson Pritchard stands apart. He is the one person who actually believes the house is genuinely haunted. He is terrified from the very beginning. And the man who played him, Elisha Cook Jr., brought something to the role that no amount of scripting could have manufactured. Elisha Cook Jr. had a long and distinguished career as a character actor, often playing nervous, frightened, or victimized roles in films noir and westerns. By the time he was cast in House on Haunted Hill, he had decades of experience channeling genuine anxiety and vulnerability on screen. His performance as Watson Pritchard is simultaneously comedic and heartbreaking. He shakes, he sweats, he mutters warnings that nobody listens to, but there is something genuinely sad about him too. He has seen things in this house before, and nobody believed. Cook brought a humanity to Pritchard that elevated the character far beyond a simple comic relief function. When Pritchard is frightened, you feel frightened with him. When he insists the house is evil, some part of you believes him even while the other characters laugh. That balance was Cook's gift. He had the ability to make an audience simultaneously smile and feel uneasy, which is one of the rarest skills in acting. What looked like a supporting role carried the emotional heart of the whole film, not just scared, heartbreakingly real. Number 7. The film was remade in 1999 with bigger budget and mixed results. 40 years after the original film terrified audiences across America, Hollywood decided to revisit House on Haunted Hill with a remake released in 1999. This new version starred Geoffrey Rush, who took on the Vincent Price role with evident enthusiasm and more than a little affection for the original material. The remake had a much larger budget, modern special effects, and a different approach to the material. Instead of relying on shadow, suggestion, and psychological tension, the 1999 version leaned heavily into graphic violence, computer-generated imagery, and a more complicated supernatural mythology. Some audiences enjoyed the remake for its intense visuals and Rush's committed performance. Others felt it missed the essential quality that made the original so enduring. The original worked because it was restrained. It trusted the audience to be scared by implication rather than spectacle. The remake showed everything, which paradoxically made it feel less scary and more like a series of expensive set pieces. Geoffrey Rush clearly loved the source material and brought genuine passion to his role, but even his best efforts could not replicate the strange, quiet menace that Vincent Price created simply by raising an eyebrow. The remake did introduce the original film to a new generation of viewers, many of whom then went back and discovered William Castle's version. In that way, the remake served a useful purpose. What tried to improve on a classic instead illuminated why the classic was great. Bigger was not better, just louder. Number 6. William Castle. Appeared in his own film, William Castle had an enormous personality, and he could never quite resist putting himself in front of the camera. In House on Haunted Hill, Castle makes a brief but memorable on-screen appearance. This was a tradition that Castle followed throughout his career, appearing in small cameo roles in many of his own productions. His cameo in House on Haunted Hill is blink and you miss it brief, but for fans of Castle's work, spotting him is a small joy. Castle approached his own cameos with the same theatrical enthusiasm he brought to every other aspect of his productions. He enjoyed being seen. He enjoyed being part of the spectacle he created. In many ways, Castle himself was the best character in any of his films. His presence in the film, even briefly, connects the story to its creator in a way that feels warm and personal. It is as if Castle is winking at the audience, reminding them that behind all the screams and skeletons, there is a person who genuinely loves stories and genuinely loves them for watching. Castle's self-appearances also reinforced his identity as a brand, a filmmaker whose personality was inseparable from the films he made. By the time audiences saw House on Haunted Hill, many of them already knew who William Castle was from his elaborate promotional campaigns. Seeing him on screen, even for a moment, felt like seeing an old friend. What looked like a small indulgence was actually brilliant personal branding, not just a director, a character in his own story. Number 5. The film entered the public domain and changed how horror was distributed. Something fascinating and somewhat unusual happened to House on Haunted Hill after its original release. Due to a copyright technicality related to how the film was registered and maintained, it entered the public domain. This means that anyone, anywhere, can legally copy, distribute, broadcast, or sell the film without paying any fees or seeking any permissions. For decades, this meant that House on Haunted Hill appeared on countless low-budget VHS compilations, late-night television broadcasts, and budget DVD collections. You could find it packaged alongside dozens of other horror films for a few dollars at gas stations and grocery stores. This wide and uncontrolled distribution actually worked in the film's favor in a remarkable way. Millions of people who might never have sought out a 1959 black and white horror film stumbled across it by accident and fell completely in love with it. New generations discovered Vincent Price. New fans found William Castle. A film that might otherwise have faded into obscurity instead became one of the most widely seen horror films of the entire 20th century. The public domain status also meant the film was among the very first horror movies to be distributed freely on the Internet, making it one of the earliest films to find a massive online audience. Today, it is available on numerous streaming platforms and digital archives at no cost. What might have seemed like a legal misfortune became an extraordinary gift to film lovers everywhere. A copyright mistake became cultural immortality. Number 4. The score was composed by Dexter, a masterpiece of mood. A horror film lives or dies by its music. The wrong score can ruin a terrifying scene. The right score can make a completely ordinary moment feel like pure dread. The music for House on Haunted Hill was composed by Dexter, and it remains one of the most effective low-budget horror scores ever created. Dexter used unconventional instruments and unusual arrangements to create sounds that felt genuinely uncomfortable to the human ear. There are passages in the score where the music seems to breathe, to moan, to shift beneath you like unstable ground. He understood that horror music should never feel predictable. The moment an audience hears a familiar musical pattern, they know what is coming, and the surprise is gone. Dexter deliberately subverted expectations by shifting tempos unexpectedly, introducing silences where music should have continued and following quiet moments with sudden loud intrusions. He also used the score to reinforce the psychological uncertainty at the heart of the story. When you cannot tell if the haunting is real or imagined, the music mirrors that confusion. It never fully resolves. It never gives you the comfort of a clear answer, just like the film itself. Dexter's work on House on Haunted Hill was never as widely celebrated as it deserved to be, partly because low-budget horror film composers of that era rarely received significant critical attention, but film music scholars who have examined the score in detail consistently describe it as remarkably sophisticated for its time and budget. What was meant as background became an invisible character in the story. Not just music, the sound of fear itself. Number 3. The film explored real human psychology. Through its horror on the surface, House on Haunted Hill looks like a simple ghost story with gimmicks and screams. But look closer, and you find something genuinely intelligent happening beneath the surface. The film is really about what happens when human beings are placed under extreme psychological pressure and how quickly trust breaks down when fear takes hold. The 5 guests in the haunted house represent different human responses to the unknown. Some investigate, some run, some freeze, some deceive. The supernatural elements of the story are almost secondary to the human drama, playing out between characters who barely know each other and have every reason not to trust anyone around them. Castle and Rob White were interested in the psychology of fear at a time when the field of psychology itself was becoming a major cultural conversation in America. The 1950s saw enormous popular interest in understanding why people behaved the way they did, what drove them to make irrational decisions, and how environments could manipulate human emotion. House on Haunted Hill was participating in that cultural conversation in a popular and accessible way. By placing normal people in an abnormal situation and watching what happened, the film was conducting a kind of thought experiment about human nature. The haunted house was not just a scary setting, it was a laboratory, and the guests were not just victims, they were subjects. What seemed like pure entertainment was actually asking serious questions about who we are when everything around us is uncertain. Not just frightening, genuinely thought-provoking. Number 2, Vincent Price used no special equipment to create fear, just his voice. In an era before digital sound enhancement, before microphone technology could be used creatively in post-production, and before audio manipulation became a filmmaking standard tool, Vincent Price created one of cinema's most chilling vocal performances, using nothing but his natural voice. Price had a voice that was genuinely extraordinary. It was deep but not thundering, smooth but not soothing. It carried warmth and menace simultaneously, which is an almost impossible combination to achieve naturally. Acting teachers often describe the ability to be charming and threatening at the same time as one of the highest performance skills, and Price possessed it completely without any technical assistance. During the filming of House on Haunted Hill, Price reportedly required very few takes for most of his scenes. He arrived on set fully prepared, understanding exactly what each moment needed emotionally and delivering it with precision. Director William Castle later described Price as the most professional and most instinctively gifted actor he had ever worked with. Price himself was modest about his abilities, often deflecting praise by joking about his dramatic appearance and naturally theatrical manner. But behind that modesty was a deeply thoughtful artist who had studied the mechanics of performance carefully throughout his career. Every pause, every shift in volume, every slight change in facial expression was calculated and controlled without ever appearing calculated or controlled. What sounded completely natural was actually deeply rehearsed mastery, not just a great voice, a perfect instrument played by a true master. Number 1, the film scared audiences. So deeply that some theaters reported medical emergencies. And here we arrive at the most extraordinary fact of all. House on Haunted Hill was so effective at generating genuine terror that a small number of theaters reported actual medical emergencies among audience members during its original run in 1959. These were not staged publicity stunts, though William Castle was certainly capable of staging such things brilliantly. These were real incidents where real people were so overwhelmed by fear, shock, or excitement that they required medical attention inside the theater. Reports from the time describe people fainting during the most intense scenes. Some audience members reportedly experienced panic attacks. A few theaters had to halt the screening temporarily to assist distressed patrons. Castle was reportedly both concerned for the affected audience members and secretly amazed that his film had achieved such a visceral physical impact on real human beings. The combination of the Emergo gimmick flying over the audience, the intense musical score, the psychological uncertainty of the story, and the deeply committed performances created a perfect storm of sensory overwhelm for some viewers. It is important to remember that in 1959, audiences were not as experienced with intense horror as modern viewers are. The genre was younger, the tricks were newer, the impact was greater. But even accounting for those differences, the documented physical responses to House on Haunted Hill speak to something remarkable about the film's power. William Castle made a movie that affected human bodies as well as human minds. That wasn't just entertainment. That was a genuine, full-body experience of fear. Bonus fact: The Hidden Wires, a secret production method that nobody talked about here, is something that almost no one knows. A small, quiet secret that hides behind the more famous stories about Emergo and Vincent Price and glowing skeleton props. When William Castle was designing the Emergo system for House on Haunted Hill, he faced a technical problem that nobody had solved before. How do you run a wire across the ceiling of hundreds of different theaters, each with different dimensions and architectural features, and still make the skeleton appear to fly smoothly and convincingly in every single venue? The solution came not from a Hollywood engineer or a theater technology expert, but from a puppeteer. Castle consulted with a professional marionette puppeteer who had spent decades understanding how to move objects smoothly through air on thin wires while an audience watched from below. The puppeteer taught Castle's team specific techniques about wire tension, attachment angles, and release mechanisms that could be adjusted quickly and simply to fit any theater ceiling. This knowledge was never publicized. Castle kept it out of press releases and interviews because he wanted the illusion to remain mysterious. The puppeteer's contribution was real, essential, and completely uncredited in all official documentation about the film's production. The techniques the puppeteer shared were ancient by the standards of live theatrical performance, dating back hundreds of years to European puppet theater traditions, where moving objects through air was considered a fine and carefully guarded art. Those old techniques, applied to a new medium in a new country in a new century, made a plastic skeleton fly over thousands of screaming American moviegoers and made them believe, just for a moment, that something impossible was happening above their heads. Old tools, new magic, new. House on Haunted Hill is more than a horror film from a long time ago. It is a reminder that imagination, courage, and a deep love of storytelling can create something that lasts forever. William Castle did not have unlimited money or technology. He had ideas, passion, and a genuine belief that audiences deserved to feel something real when they went to the movies. Vincent Price did not have digital effects or sound enhancement. He had his voice, his presence, and his complete dedication to making every moment feel true. And Rob White did not have months to craft his story. He had days, a simple premise, and the understanding that human beings are most frightening to each other. Together, they made a movie that still makes people scream, laugh, think, and wonder more than 60 years later. That is not a small thing. That is one of the rarest things in the world. A story that refuses to die. Every movie hides a truth inside it, and the truth hiding inside House on Haunted Hill is this. Fear is most powerful not when it is shown to us, but when it is suggested. The unknown is always scarier than the known. And the best storytellers understand that the audience's imagination will always outperform any special effect ever invented. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time.